Commissioner, the first witness this morning is Mr. Josh Burns. I call him.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Burns, will you take an oath or an affirmation?
I'm happy to take either, but I'm happy to take an oath.
All right. I think there's a copy of the Tarnagar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Right. I do.
Yes.
Mr. Burns, what's your full name, please?
My name is Joshua Solomon Burns.
Your address is known to the Commission, and you are the Member of Federal Parliament for the seat of McNamara in Victoria.
I am.
And you took up that role on the 2nd of July 2019, is that right?
Yes, that's when we were sworn in. We actually won the election on the 18th of May, but it takes a while for it to become official.
Yes. Your electorate office is located in St Kilda.
It is.
Can you please tell the Commissioner a little bit about the structure of that office, what's done from there and the staff that you have there and so on?
Absolutely. So it's a federal electorate office, so it serves the people of McNamara. We have around 140,000 people who live in the electorate of McNamara. It's a bit more as the population grows. And I have a team of 5 full-time equivalent staff who look after everything from answering questions that people have when they call the office, to assistance with federal government departments like the NDIS, like immigration cases. They help me with my community engagement work when community groups want grants, when they want access to different government departments. It's a functional office there to support the community of McNamara, and I'm very fortunate to have wonderful people who work in my office, the majority of which aren't Jewish, but some of them are, and yeah, they're great people.
You've described in your statement your family background. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. So, all 4 of my grandparents were born in different countries. Only one was born in Carlton, in Melbourne. It's why I go for the Carlton Football Club. But other than that, my grandparents on my father's side were from the United Kingdom, and then my grandmother left Scotland. My grandmother on my mother's side left Germany in 1938, about the week before the Kristallnacht, and she was stateless when she came to Australia. She was part of the small number of Jewish people who were able to get into Australia prior to World War II. And all 4 of my grandparents are Jewish, and they all sort of descended, whether it was from different parts of Melbourne or Europe, into what is now my electorate and the community that I grew up in. And yeah, this country gave my family everything. On my father's side, they were 10-pound poms and came with nothing. And in 2 generations, I'm able to become a member of the federal parliament. And I think that's a wonderful reflection on our country, that poor Jewish migrants can set up a life and have opportunity to dream big and to build a family. And Australia has given my family everything, and we owe it a lot.
You grew up in Melbourne?
I did.
Can you
as
describe...
beautiful as this city is, I proudly grew up in Melbourne.
Well, we'll forgive you for that for the moment. You attended a Jewish day school?
I went to Gardenvale Primary School, which was a state school, and then I went to Mount Scopus College, which was at my high school.
You played sports with the local basketball team, I understand?
I did. I can't say my game's getting better, Councillor.
Now, can I ask you about some of the education experiences at school? You obviously had an understanding of the Holocaust from your family, but were you taught about that at school?
I think that my first distinct memory of Holocaust education was when we went to the Holocaust Museum, and then also we had a screening of Schindler's List in high school, and that sort of started an intensive examination of the Holocaust as part of my high school education. But my grandmother actually, she obviously was German, and she still felt very connected to her German heritage. She still went to the German club in the CBD of Melbourne. We're not really sure why, but she kind of liked it, and she never lost that part of who she was, and in fact, I think she found comfort in Australia. But she also, we also did grow up knowing that the family that she left behind, the family that weren't able to escape prior to World War II, were in a small town that was one of the first sent to Auschwitz, and all of the family that my grandmother left behind, we believe, were killed on the 15th of February 1941 in a gas chamber. So I think it's the Holocaust was something that it sort of, we all knew about, we all were taught about, and then at school I remember learning about it in greater context, and in fact I studied a few units on it in university as well. But for my own family, it was something that was a bit more personal and a bit quieter and a bit more something that my grandmother made sure we knew, but we also didn't talk about that much.
And your own experience at primary school and high school in Melbourne, did you encounter anti-Semitism in those years?
I mean, to be honest, I can count on one hand the incidents of anti-Semitism that happened prior to really October 7. I mean, even after becoming elected to the federal parliament, October 7, 2023, I maybe a couple of times on a sporting field, but that was probably a reflection of the fact that it was just, the game was getting a little bit heated. But never did I grow up thinking being Jewish was ever going to be something I would have to hide, something that would prohibit me from reaching any part of Australian society or reaching any of the goals that I would have for my life or for my family. But something dramatic shifted in October 2023.
And by that stage, you'd been a member of Parliament for some 4 years or so. Can I just go back to the period after high school and before you entered Parliament? What did you do in that period?
So I finished university, travelled, did all of that sort of things that a young person should do, and then I came back and worked for a publishing company, and I was in a really good job, but I wanted to pursue politics, and so I, through a series of sacrifices, left a full-time gig to go and work part-time in politics, and then after a successful but non-victorious attempt at winning the state seat of Caulfield in 2014, I managed to work or get a job working for Daniel Andrews, who was the Premier of Victoria, and worked for him for 4 years. And then the plan was never actually to become the member for McNamara. That was meant to be a friend of mine, but when the train arrives at the station, you have to get on it. So I'm been very lucky to be elected now 3 times by the people of McNamara.
Can you describe the electorate to us, for those of us who try to avoid Melbourne?
With great pleasure. The electorate of McNamara is the inner south of Melbourne. So the border is the Yarra River. So we've got some of the country's finest arts institutions in South Bank, everything from the Australian Ballet, the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, the Arts Centre, so many other different national galleries of Victoria, all of that sort of part of it. Then we have Port Melbourne, which is such a historic community, but also gentrifying, moving all the way down the bay into St Kilda, around Elwood, looping into Elstonwick and Caulfield, which is where I grew up and where a lot of the Jewish community live in East St Kilda, Ripponlea, Caulfield North, and then back up through Windsor, Albert Park, Middle Park and Albert Park, and South Melbourne as well.
So it has a vibrant Jewish community?
Very, very vibrant, yes. We're the largest Jewish electorate in Victoria. I believe Wentworth is the only electorate in the country that has a larger Jewish population.
Your statement addresses a brief summary of what you have heard from your constituents about their experiences of anti-Semitism. Are you able to encapsulate that for the Commissioner?
I think the most stark story I remember was I was in Canberra, and they have school children coming to Canberra to participate in civics education. And I had a group of Year 9 girls from Beth Rivka Ladies College, which is a a Jewish school right in the heart of my electorate. And I said to them, put up your hand if you've experienced anti-Semitism. And they all put up their hand. I said, all right, well, let's dissect that. Put up your hand if you've had someone, say, shout at you on the way to and from school, walking to and from school. And barely a hand went down. These are Year 9 girls who are distinctly dressed in sort of school uniforms that have a sort of modest and religious design to them. And these Year 9 girls had all experienced someone pulling up on one of the high streets in and around my community, near where I live, screaming at them because they're Jewish. And
when was this, Mr. Burns?
the students came to Canberra last year, so it was again the same sort of timeline of the escalation in anti-Semitism post October 7.
And you refer to the steps you've taken to provide some sort of response to the concerns raised with you by your constituents, and you've indicated some of the meetings and time you've spent with that. Could you describe?
I mean, unfortunately, I've spent way too much time trying to respond to anti-Semitism, and whether it be, I was chair of a parliamentary inquiry on anti-Semitism at universities, so I've met with a lot of Jewish students about their experience at university. It was the Human Rights Committee that did that inquiry that I was the chair of. I've met with Jewish artists on a number of occasions when they have been, either shows have been cancelled or they have been shut out of places that they would otherwise be able to express themselves creatively. I've been, as I said, met with school students. I've met with so many different people in my electorate, doctors, mental health professionals, people who feel like they have had some part of their life restricted because of being, on the basis of them being Jewish. And it has been one of the hardest things as a member of parliament, who also now is a member of the government, or privileged to be a member of the government, to respond in a way that's adequate. And clearly this Royal Commission is so important because there is still more work to be done. And following the terror incidents at Bondi, it's never been more urgent to make sure that the work of this commission returns our country, or at least lays out a pathway to return our country back to all of the people who live in my electorate, not worrying about whether or not they're dressing or identifying themselves as being visibly Jewish, or whether they're worried about how it'll affect their workplace or how it'll impact their life in Australia. Because I know that, just like my family, the people who I represent, they love this country and it means everything to them.
Do the reports from your constituents reflect the characteristic that you referred to earlier, namely since October 7, 2023, there's been quite a change in the extent and nature of anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. And I'm sure the ECAJ or some of the other Jewish community organisations can give the exact numbers on the incidents, but from all accounts, certainly from our records as well, the spike in anti-Semitism post-October 7 was real.
In terms of your electorate office in St Kilda since October 2023, can you describe what you've had to deal with in that context?
I mean, obviously the most high-profile incident was on 19 June 2024, when I woke up and my office manager, my staff member, called me. It was about 6 a.m. and they were sort of, you could hear this panic in their voice. And she said to me, Josh, someone's attacked the office, turn on the news. And I turned on the news and it was blanket coverage of my office, which was so surreal. I mean, this was, anyone's welcome to come to our office in Barclay Street, but it's, it's a sort of pretty sort of suburban part of St Kilda and not that interesting. And to have so much, to have all of the sirens and the blue and red lights surrounding it, the fire brigade putting out the fire. Initially, I remember seeing the images of sort of a small hole in the glass with sort of much much bigger sort of ricochets into the glass, and I thought, oh my gosh, someone's shot into my office. That was my initial thought. And then I saw the footage that someone had off the CCTV, and I was almost relieved that all they brought was a hammer to come in and smash up our office. And I was actually speaking to my colleague Tim Watts, who's the member for Jellybrand, yesterday, and he said he's also had his office vandalised, but he's never had horns drawn on his head or had the sort of graffiti that I had surrounding it.
I'll bring up an image which you've attached to your statement, if you don't mind. It's stat.899.000.001.0282. It's an extra JB2 to your statement, showing the street front of your electorate office, and you can see the smashed glass in the door that you've just referred to.
Yeah. The two bits that were you can see on the right hand side where it's got the white writing of Josh Burns MP, and then it's the clearer background. You can see the sort of smaller pinpoints at the start, and then how the glass sort of spreads from there. That was the initial concern. But then what we later realised was the most dangerous part was underneath where the photo of me sort of sitting down is. You can see a burnt communications pit. Yeah. Where they set alight. But then the other communications pit that was also set alight was right outside the residential door, which is right next to the door in my office, where it leads up to 4 residential apartments, where families were evacuated at 3:30 in the morning, including a young baby. And yeah, it was pretty reckless and pretty dangerous, that incident. And
then the writing on the left is not completely clear in the photograph, but it says Zionism is fascism over a photograph of you.
With horns on my head.
With horns
Yeah.
on your head. How did that impact you personally?
I mean, my first thought was for like the residents above, and I was actually sort of felt guilty that they had to get evacuated in the morning. Thankfully, they were all incredible and generous, and not particularly pleased that they were evacuated, but they were all kind to me and my team. Because of the communication pits, all of the businesses lost internet for the whole week, and we kind of went up and down to all of the people. We know everyone on the street, and yeah, some of the businesses were pretty affected by it all. But the main thing I felt was really for my staff. I mean, like, this is their workplace. This is, at the time, I think I had 2 Jewish staff members. Maybe majority of my staff were not Jewish. They were progressive young people who cared about the Labor Party, who cared about our country, wanted to work in politics, had big dreams about influencing policy and progressive change in Australia. And they come to work and they see this, young women who are, law students, and yeah, I felt like we were lost. That how is this part of the democracy that we all hold dear? How is this adding to the debate? How is this something that is going to also solve anything in the Middle East? I mean, I said at a press conference the next day, if I thought that smashing up my office was going to bring about peace in the Middle East, give me a hammer, I'll do it myself. But it didn't. And all it did was just cost $100,000 to fix and scare a lot of people.
It was also followed by a social media response.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is part of the thing that is really it's difficult to sort of explain, but in my mind, this is sort of the narrative that unfolds here. That I think the Royal Commission, I wanted to put to the Royal Commission, is that if you inherently think that Jewish people are evil and therefore they can be, they're fair game, well, that's a particular type of person. But actually, I think that the bigger problem is when people draw more subtle links and start justifying things like that. And what I mean by that is, if you think that a lot of the criticism I have is that I somehow are loyal to the state of Israel, not Australia. I'm not an Israeli citizen. I've never been an Israeli citizen. I have no desire to be an Israeli citizen. I'm a proud Australian. I grew up here. I was born here. I'm a citizen of this amazing country. Yet a lot of the criticism is that somehow Jewish people are loyal to Israel, not Australia. And therefore, they then should be held responsible for the actions of the Israeli government because they're more loyal to them than they are to us. It's a sort of us and them narrative. And then therefore, we'll look at what the Israeli government's doing. It's nothing that you do to a Jewish person in Australia is as bad as that, so it's fine. And that sort of justification and that narrative of, well, they're loyal to them, what they're doing is terrible, therefore they're fair game. That's the sort of justification and that logic that I saw so often on my posts that, it's okay. Oh, it's only a few smashed windows. What about this or what about that? And when you see a lot of the commentary that is directed at me, it's somehow I'm celebrating the death of Palestinian kids or celebrating the death of the Palestinian people when the truth is absolutely not that. I mean, I've said on so many occasions that if I could see one thing in my lifetime, it would be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I dream of seeing the Middle East sorting itself out and finding a peaceful pathway forward. I don't want to see death and destruction on anyone. And to attribute that sort of intent or maliciousness to a Jewish person, or to attribute some sort of dual loyalty, is to create a space in which these sorts of things, like what happened to my office, is justified. It's a complete dehumanization of Jewish people, and I think that's where anti-Semitism in the mainstream can catch on, and that's where it can get really dangerous.
Can I call up on the screen a couple of the posts that you've referred to,
Sure.
and you've just provided a few examples attached to your statement. So the document is stat.899.0001.0283. That's an extra 3 to your statement. And this is just a selection, and I'll just refer to some of what you've included.
Yeah.
On this first page, the first comment on the page evidently is just refers to the photograph of you with horns, and then the suggestion in the tweet on X, and the second entry has that characteristic you referred to of immediately attributing to you a so-called genocidal characteristic, and then over the page, please. The comment at the top suggesting it was most likely conducted by Zionists themselves. So one of these false flag conspiracy theories that we've seen in the Commission. And then I think the third one down reflects one of your other observations about the suggestion repeatedly made that you have a loyalty to Israel rather than to Australia. So you came to be aware of numerous social media posts in this sort of category, is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately we had to become diligent in trying to record some of them because it was pretty overwhelming. I mean, I'd make 2 points. One is that a social media post on X, you sort of you can dust it off and keep moving through your day. But there is a problem where, as I said, there are narratives and there is sort of the abuse that people get that they really shouldn't have to, and there should be greater safeguards to prevent people from having to be subjected to this sort of abuse. I would think, especially online, which is such a big arena, and it is such a big vector for people's views and beliefs to be spread very quickly across society. And I'd say that the Jewish community came to Australia because of the rights and freedoms that are attributed and that belong to Australians. Rights like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the rights to assemble, the rights to practice your faith freely. All rights have intersections, and there are very few absolute rights, as this commission knows. But surely it's well within the rights of not just the Jewish community, but all Australians to be able to participate freely in our democracy without being vilified or having their loyalties questioned or having attacks being justified or somehow, this sort of dehumanisation as part of a sort of complete removal of any civility that we would show each other normally. I mean, you wouldn't walk down the street and scream this at someone else. Why should you be able to do it 30 times a day online? And I think this commission has a hard job of finding the right way of navigating this to not stop people being able to participate freely in our democracy. I am a fierce defender of the institutions of our democracy. I'm a proud member of one of the most important democratic institutions in the world. But I also think that one of the things that all Australians would want is to be able to live life in Australia without facing this every day.
You've provided in your statement some summary statistics of communications that your electorate office has received and that have been posted in respect of across various platforms. And you've recorded in paragraph 15 that the electorate office has received between 8,000 and 10,000 emails since October 7, 2023. And I take it, well, can I ask what proportion of those are critical or abusive that you've set out in your statement?
I would say that very few people write to me about the Middle East saying how much they agree with me. In fact, most of the time people write to me about the Middle East with some form of advice, often free and often frank. But that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's encouraged. It's part of our democracy where the vast majority of the communications of those tens of thousands of bits of incoming were either agreeable, disagreeable, critical. They gave me advice. There was a whole range of them, but the vast majority of them were not abuse. They were not anti-Semitic. They were just part of the democratic process where people are absolutely free to express themselves in a particular way. There is a much smaller percentage of them that absolutely disintegrate into anti-Semitism. And I think the way that I differentiate that and the way that I make that delineation is that when you are talking about a particular policy of either the Australian government, the Israeli government, or you're talking about a policy that I'm referring to, fair game. Criticise, tear it apart, disagree, protest against it. That is your democratic right. But if you are attributing certain qualities, and often malicious qualities, to an individual, or you're directing your criticism in a malicious way towards a Jewish person in Australia about the policies of the Israeli government on the other side of the world, well, then that often and almost always disintegrates into vilification and racial abuse. And yeah, the vast majority, though, Councillor, are perfectly civil, and I try and engage and respond to them as much as possible.
You've referred to over 1,000 phone calls and approximately 10,000 social media messages and comments that the electorate officers observed and recorded, and some of those at the abusive and anti-Semitic end of the spectrum you've recorded in a statement. In an attachment to your statement. Can I just bring that up for a moment?
Sure.
So it's stat.899.0001.0281. and this is, again, a summary of some only of the either abusive or anti-Semitic or both communications that you've received across various means. So the first one was in an email,
Yeah.
blaming you explicitly for responsibility for the violence, referring to the Bondi attack. Then, if we can go over the page, another series of extracted comments. Perhaps just draw attention to the one at the foot of the page, which is the text of a voicemail message left in your electorate office, accompanying abuse with the trope that we've seen of attributing Zionism as taking over Australia.
Yeah.
And then on the next page, so the first entry at the top of the page, explicit criticism of you and attribution of blame for the action of Israel. And then the second one calling for violence against Zionists, trying to justify attacks on Jews. So these posts and messages, of course, are dealt in the first instance by your electorate staff. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge responsibility, and it's a huge effort for my staff to have to take steps to either hide comments, report comments, or turn comments off altogether if there's no time. There's the safety features that social media platforms have is basically just to turn off comments, which again goes against the sort of democratic instincts that I have. I want people to be able to agree and disagree with what I say, but it's a huge effort to manage all of this, and it's pretty, I mean, just looking at it now, it's sort of, it's pretty heavy. It's a heavy thing to wear, and my staff are all kind and caring people, and they don't want to have to read this all day. And instead of it being some sort of race to make it safer to engage online, the social media companies, you can report things and they rarely will return your call or return an outcome, or at least give a justification of an outcome. It just disappears into a black hole, which is exceptionally frustrating. But the other thing also, on a sort of more general level, is that underneath a lot of this is that it's pretty perverse to blame the Jewish people for anti-Semitism or for attacks against the Jewish community. I mean, you wouldn't do it to any other community. You wouldn't, it's like being stabbed twice. Once for the anti-Semitism and once being blamed for being stabbed in the first place. It's something that the Jewish community unfortunately has to face a lot of, and yeah.
You've also given some evidence about a video that you made with Allegra Spender MP and Julian Leeser MP, which was published on the 29th of April this year. And in the video, the three of you together called on constituents to make submissions to the Royal Commission, to this Royal Commission.
We did. I mean, this is a really important commission, and it's got a big job, and I didn't want it to be a political message that it was just me saying, please make a submission. I wanted to do that across party lines, and Julian, Allegra and myself have worked on projects before, and I like them both very much, and we decided to record a video encouraging people to make a submission to this Royal Commission because we felt it was important. And what happened was, unfortunately, anytime you speak about the Jewish community or Israel, the Middle East, or anyone. It's like a big starting gun, and it's almost like the social media platforms drive that traffic to the darkest corners of the community or society, where the people who are the most antagonistic are sent the content that they're most likely to be abusive on. And yeah, even yeah, and that video, unsurprisingly, just received yet another reminder of why this commission is so important, and a justification for it to be set up in the first place.
So again, if you don't mind, I'll call up the attachment to your statement where you've reproduced a selection of the abusive and anti-Semitic comments after that video was posted. So it's stat.899.00001.0285, your attachment 5. And this too has a series of abusive, offensive posts. The second last one on the page, down the bottom, calling for murder. The final entry on the page, that characteristic you just mentioned of blaming Jewish people for anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And if we can go over the page, another AI-generated item of anti-Semitic abuse. What did you or your office do to try and address or respond to these types of comments and posts?
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I said we had a great faith in the social media platforms to be able to help us manage this, and in fact, it's a great frustration that they don't. Most of the time we just block accounts from being able to participate if they're abusive or blatantly racist. But yeah, I would hope that there's it's probably a more sophisticated response that could be made, but it's got to be made by the social media platforms about the sort of conduct that is acceptable online, the sorts of complaint procedures they would have, the sorts of algorithms that are driving people towards the content that, whether, you know, have they been abusive on previously, what sort of language are they using. I mean, Instagram knows when I was looking for a new high chair for my 6-month-old. They can do a better job of making it a bit safer online, I would have thought. Every time you open your mouth, Meta is listening, so it's really not acceptable that the sorts of responses that get directed every single time you talk about an issue like this reflects this. Yeah. And it's okay, Council. I may also sort of say, like, one of the things we didn't do in relation to this, but one of the things that I've had frustration with in the past is around, well, if the social media platforms don't take responsibility, what other steps can be taken? And I have taken accounts to the E-Safety Commissioner in the past, of which they were, very open to helping and very open to assisting. However, the current restrictions in the E-Safety Act or the Online Safety Act only allow the E-Safety Commission to intervene in an account where there is someone is commenting on an individual and inciting or vilifying that individual, not against a group of people. So you can be critical of a Jewish person and name them, but you can't be critical of the Jewish people, for example, or you could be, yeah. So that is a huge restriction, because a lot of the comments that you've seen are broader than just attacking an individual. While they might be responding to an individual, they're actually about a group of people. And to me, that seems like something that could be looked at for reform, that would enable the E-Safety Commission to act as a better safety net, so that when you do get comments and accounts that are acting in a way that are vilifying a group of people, whether it be Jews, Muslims, First Nations people, LGBTIQ people. This isn't just about the Jewish community. This is about all people. That those accounts can be either taken offline or directed to be taken offline by some form of safety net in the e-safety commissioner.
You've given a brief summary of your reports of anti-Semitic material to social media platforms. And in paragraph 31, you say that you've submitted 44 reports in relation to offensive and anti-Semitic material on Instagram and Facebook since November 2021.
Yep.
3 of those have resulted in removal. 9 were received by the platforms but not responded to. Is that right?
Yep, those numbers are correct. And I think the other thing to say, other than the vast majority of those 44 being not responded to at all by the social media platforms, is that I think the vast majority of examples you lose faith in the reporting processes, and I certainly don't report everything that I would otherwise, because I don't think anything's going to be done about it.
Yes. Can I ask you about some anti-Semitic criticism directed towards your partner, who's Ms. Georgie Purcell? She herself is a member of the Legislative Council in Victoria.
Yes.
She is not herself Jewish. And can you describe what has occurred since your relationship became public in, I think, July 2024?
It's probably one of the hardest things. You can sort of dust off things about yourself, but to have someone that you love get that sort of abuse is, it's awful. And she gets this sort of the same questioning of her loyalty and the same attribution of blame that I get, but she gets a layer of misogyny and a layer of sort of violent sexualized comments on top of it as well that I don't get. And it's actually really stark, the difference in the types of comments that both have this anti-Semitic undertones, but she also has this extra layer of misogyny that she has to deal with. And it's a weird feeling knowing that your partner has to take abuse because they're in a relationship with you. It's a pretty awful feeling, actually, and not because I feel sorry for myself, but because why should she have to deal with that? And even making a submission, and we were sort of having a conversation, and she was very conscientious not to be trying to, sort of seek publicity on this. This is the last thing she wants. She doesn't want to be seen to be, she's a politician, and there's often a lot of cynicism in politics, and she didn't want to be seen in any way of trying to get attention for herself by putting forward this submission or by putting out some of the examples. But actually, even just speaking out, she will attract an avalanche of hate and misogyny and anti-Semitism just by speaking out, and that's a lot to sort of walk into. But to see your family, to see your staff, to see the people you love around you, just because they're associated with you, cop this sort of abuse is it's devastating.
And you've attached to your statement another annexure which has a similar multi-page spreadsheet of social media posts with the abuse against her. Can I just bring up one page from that, if
Please.
you don't mind? stat.899.000.0286_R at page 0003, please. some screen captures from posts on X. The comments made after the birth of your baby daughter.
Yeah.
And the comments on the right needn't be read out. Obviously involve abuse and the kind of attribution to her of the characteristics that you've just described, and including just outright anti-Semitic abuse at the foot of that page.
I think, like, this kind of goes without saying, but I don't think we should be mistaking advocacy for the rights of Palestinians, which is a legitimate and important cause, for what we're seeing here. And I was even talking to one of my good friends who's a Palestinian member of parliament about, after Bondi happened, he called me up straight away and he said, you know, can I come to a community event with you? What do you think? And I said, of course. You know, there's got to be room for him to care about his people and the welfare of the Palestinian people, and also to know that anti-Semitism directed at Jewish Australians is unacceptable, and the terror attack against Jewish Australians is unacceptable. And of course there is room for both. You know, they are not counterproductive or in conflict. What we're seeing here, though, are people trying to use a cause in order to vilify and justify and dehumanize people, to target someone who cares deeply about the cause that they're purporting to be advocating for, and to reduce them to malicious caricatures of the ancient anti-Semitism that we would thought would never be a part of Australia. And Georgie's someone who, you know, she's not Jewish, but she's obviously, her partner is, her daughter is, you know, my 8-year-old daughter as well is Jewish, and Georgie cares deeply about them, and it's something that she has to walk into and confront, and she should never have had to do that. So I feel extremely guilty almost that she has to face this, and every time she does speak out, I know that she has to face this and more of this, and some people can walk away from it, but it gets pretty heavy when you face this. And she's also much better at social media than I am, and has a much bigger following, and her platform is far more impressive. Although I do have great social media staff as well. They'll be angry that I said that, but her audience is huge, and so the frequency and the sort of veracity of some of the comments that she gets is worse than me.
So can we take that page down? Thank you. You've made some observations towards the end of your statement about the consequences of normalisation of hatred and anti-Semitism that you see occurring in social media. Can you describe that and what effect that has on the Jewish community?
I mean, let's take the starting point. The Jewish community love this country. As I know, all different minorities love this country. All different people love this country. Australia's a wonderful place, and the country that I grew up in was a place where I never had to hide my Magen David that I'm wearing underneath my shirt. I never had to hide or be worried about whether or not I was identifiably Jewish. I never had to worry about who I was, and I think that the Jewish community in Australia, you know, we always felt that this was sort of the golden Medina. This was the golden era of Jewish life. I think I've got something like 31 synagogues in my electorate, all within a few square kilometres. I mean, there's way too many, but they're all beautiful in their own sense. And people love going and participating in Jewish life. But when you have this relentless abuse online and this relentless inability or trying to squash or confront or push back or push down on Jewish people just for participating in democracy or participating in online conversations or participating in our, you know, in their workplace, their cultural institution, it is a message saying to the Jewish people that you don't belong in this Australia. And I think that I think that we all want to belong. We all want to feel hope and have dreams about what Australia can be for ourselves, for our kids, just like my grandparents did when they came to this country. But when you see this sort of torrent of abuse and this dehumanisation, you question whether you have a place in this country. And I hope that this commission is able to meticulously think about ways of restoring that confidence in that place in Australia, just as you want for every single Australian, so that the Jewish community doesn't have to worry about what they're wearing or worry about what people will think just on the basis that they're Jewish or whether their loyalties are even in this country. I can assure you they are.
You referred a little earlier to your hope that there might be some strengthening of vilification laws or the e-safety commissioner's role. Is there anything else in that respect you'd like to observe?
Following Bondi, obviously the government brought a series of reforms to the Parliament, one of which was an attempt at a serious vilification clause. I do think this commission is the appropriate body to examine how that would work, what sort of threshold may be applied, and how it may operate, and in its intersection with the state jurisdictions as well. It is a very difficult thing to legislate and police, but it may be worth considering how it can be adopted in terms of rules for online safety, how it could be adopted for participation in community forums, how, I don't want to restrict people's ability to participate in our democracy. I just want to protect people from being vilified, and I just want to make sure that people don't have to curtail their own participation in democracy just on the basis that they're Jewish or Muslim or queer or whatever they are. So I think this needs to be considered in the sense of how do we protect people from vilification while also enabling free and full participation in our democracy. And I think that there were criticisms or concerns raised with the way in which the vilification clauses were put forward both by the Conservative and the Greens part of the Parliament, all of which need to be taken seriously, and this commission, I would hope, would weigh up all of that and on the balance consider whether or not serious vilification reform would be required. The other part that I do think, which I've already touched on the Online Safety Act, ultimately it rests with the social media platforms. The spread and the pace in which people can get an audience means that you're not waiting for years and years for reputations to be spread around the whispers of street corners. It can happen overnight, where things can go viral and algorithms we know are preying on people's insecurities in order to hold their attention. It's almost as if, and my guess is that the social media platforms are directing content that is going to elicit a response from people who are going to send abusive reactions back and vilify people who have put up that content. So how social media companies have been allowed to get away with it up until now is beyond me. I think they bear a huge responsibility for some of the toxic nature in which our political debate has descended to. The civility that is no longer a part of so much of political debate, I think, is happening online. And this is, I think, the biggest arena of anti-Semitism we're seeing on a daily basis. Obviously, Bondi was the most severe, but this is the frequency and the volume is happening online. So I would hope that that is a big consideration. But the final thing I would say is that there's got to be a safety net, because if they continue their mismanagement of this, then the E-Safety Commission is the right place to be able to have another avenue to turn to. And it seems to me, even though it's not yet government policy or not government policy, it seems to me a huge shortfall in the E-Safety Commissioner's remit not to be able to examine posts that also do exactly the sort of things that we've looked at today on the screen, is that they target people on the basis of their religion or race, not just on an individual basis, which you would have thought is well within the E-Safety Commission to be able to look at. So I focused my submission on that. I don't pretend for one second this is an easy job, but I really believe in this country. I love this country, and it's given me and my family everything. So I would hope that we have to keep trying to enable the sort of life that my two daughters are able to grow up in is one where they're able to be who they are and be free to do so in a way that is safe and secure.
Thanks, Mr. Burns. No further questions.
Yes. I'm going to assume that there are no questions from the bar table. So thank you very much, Mr. Burns.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You are excused.
Thank you.
Commissioner, before I call the next
Yes.
witness, or ask Mr. Sherman to call the next witness, there are some technical issues I've been advised of, and it may be appropriate to try to resolve them over an adjournment. So would you take an early morning tea
An
adjournment?
early morning tea. Very radical, but I will.